Turn to page 16 in your booklets. This is a warm-up for the quiz you are taking today on scientific notation. I want to work one of these problems with you, then have you pause the video and finish the warm-up yourself, and then come back and go over the warm-up together. So, I want to talk about these calculation problems at the bottom of page 16. When you are putting scientific notation calculations in your calculator, make sure that as you type it, you still type the scientific notation into your calculator using the E button. So like for this problem right here, instead of typing 5.45 times 10 to the 19th power, you would type 5.45, get the E, and then your exponent is 19, so just 19, times 9.78e negative 2. You should be typing it like this in your calculator. I want to more specifically talk about these ones that involve division. If you are using the E button, you do not need to type any parentheses when you do these divisions. If you're not using the E button and you don't put parentheses in the right place, it's going to give you the wrong answer. That's why we use the E button. So, but just to be clear, what's going on here is this front number in both of these. This is like, this is just 6.27 times 10 to the fourth. You could also picture that as 6.27 times 10 to the fourth over 1. Or like in part C here, 3.33 times 10 to the negative 16th over 1. And when you do that, it might make it a little more obvious what calculation you're supposed to be doing. Remember, if you're multiplying fractions, this is something you probably did in, I don't know, like 5th grade, 6th grade. Like if you do 3/4 times 1/2, the way you're supposed to multiply that is straight across. 3 times 1 and 4 times 2. Top times top, bottom times bottom. So 3 times 1 is 3, 4 times 2 is 8, and you get 3/8. Now in chemistry we don't leave anything in the form of a fraction. We would convert it to a decimal. So then from there you would divide 3 divided by 8. You know, a fraction is a division problem, so 3 divided by 8. And then your final answer would be 0.375. So when you go look at problems like B and C, you can multiply straight across. Top times top, get a new top. Bottom times bottom, get a new bottom. And then divide top over bottom to get your final answer. So like in part B, you would type in your calculator 6.27 times 10 to the fourth, except instead of that times 10, you use the E button. Go ahead and type it. Remember, to get the E button, you hit second on your calculator, and then you hit the comma on your calculator. Second comma will get you the E. So 6.27 E4 times 5.26 E negative 20. And if you're typing it correctly in your calculator, it should look like this. And if you're not typing it in your calculator correctly, you're going to have something different there. So please double check. Look at your calculator, look at my calculator. Do they look the same? Did we get the exact same answers? In either case, hopefully you have been typing it correctly. We have a new top now. I'm just going to copy that top here. And then on the bottom, 1 times 7, you should not need your calculator for that. 1 times 7 is 7. Now we just divide new top divided by new bottom. So this new top I just had divided by 7. I get 4.711457114. Do you actually need all those digits? No, we're supposed to round to the hundredths place. So 4.71 is the hundredths place, and there's a 1 next to it that tells me to round down. So that becomes just 4.71. And don't forget to look at the end of your calculator. E negative 16 means you have to write times 10 to the negative 16 at the end to make sure it's still scientific notation. Okay, so having gone through that, go ahead and finish this warm-up, pause the video, finish the warm-up, and then come back and I'll go over the rest. All right, and at this point, if the video is playing, you must have finished your warm-up. So, let's talk about the stop section. When we go from standard notation to scientific notation, remember we're always supposed to end with some coefficient times 10 raised to some power. Some coefficient times 10 raised to some power. And the power depends on how many times you move the decimal point. Whether the power is positive or negative depends on if your starting number is bigger than or smaller than 1. So if we look at this very first problem, this starting number, which is like 4,340,500,000, this starting number is much bigger than 1, so our exponent should end up being positive. And when I move the decimal, remember, if they didn't write a decimal, it must be at the very end here. And I want to move the decimal so that my coefficient becomes a number that is between 1 and 10. So I'm going to keep moving it to make this starting number smaller, because 4 billion is much bigger than 10, so I've got to keep going. If I move it this many times, I get to 434. Keep going, 43.4. That's still bigger than 10. Keep going. Oh, 4.3. That's between 1 and 10. So I'm going to stop there. 4.3405. And we count how many times we moved it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times. So my exponent is 9. No, you don't have to put the positive sign. When we look at the next problem, this starting number is smaller than 1. That tells me my exponent's going to have to be negative. And yes, a negative sign you do have to actually write in there. So when I decide, okay, this number is smaller than 1, the starting standard notation number is smaller than 1, the exponent's going to have to be negative. That also tells me I should be moving the decimal point in the direction that makes my coefficient be between 1 and 10. If I move it this way, it's going to keep getting smaller and smaller and smaller than 1. That's not going to work. So I've got to go the other way, this way. Eventually I get to 0.4, that's still smaller than 1. Move it one more time. Oh, 4.119, that's a number between 1 and 10. And from there I just count how many times I moved it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There you go. Looking at our next problem, 6.72 times 10 to the third, this 3 tells me that the starting standard notation number, since this is a positive 3, my standard notation number should be a number bigger than 1, which means I need to make sure I move the decimal point in a direction that makes it bigger. If I move it to the left, I'm going to get a number smaller than 1, 0.6. That's not going to work for me. I need to go the other way, make it bigger than 1. 67, 672. Remember, you're supposed to move it 3 times. So we get 672, and then I had to move it one more time, so I'm going to stick a 0 in that extra spot. And this last one in the chart, there's a negative exponent. That means my starting number needs to be smaller than 1. I need to make this number smaller. So I'm going to move it 6 times in a direction that makes it smaller. If you move it to the right, it's going to get bigger. 5.7 becomes 57. That's not the direction I want to go. So I've got to move it 6 times the other way. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And all of those empty spots, I'm just going to stick some zeros in there, so that my final answer becomes 5 zeros, and then 576. Just like that. When I come down to these calculations, I mentioned how you should be typing this in your calculator using the E button. If you actually type it in there and you type it in there correctly, then your calculator should report back to you. It says 5.3301. Remember, we round to the hundredths place, so that's going to be 5.33, and that 0 rounds it down and just keeps it at 5.33. And then it says E18. That means we also need to write times 10 to the 18th in here. We already did part B together. Let's look at part C. Again, when you're multiplying fractions, you go straight across, top times top, bottom times bottom. Get a new top and a new bottom. So that's your first step, 3.33. And again, instead of typing times 10, you should type in E. Negative 16 times 2. And 6.66 times 10 to the negative 16. And on the bottom, 1 times anything is just itself, so you really shouldn't need to type that. Now we have a new top and a new bottom. Remember, when you put this in your calculator, you should type 6.66 E negative 16, 9.37 E3, so that when you type this division in your calculator, it should look like this: 6.66 second comma negative 16 divided by 9.37 second comma 3. Make sure it looks exactly like that. You shouldn't have any extra time signs. You shouldn't have typed a 10 anywhere. You shouldn't have hit this little carety exponent button. None of that. If you typed it correctly, your calculator should return this to you. And again, we round to the hundredths place, so 7.10, and this 7 next to it should round us up. So instead of 7.10, we write 7.11. This E negative 20 means we write times 10 to the negative 20th power. And that's our final answer. All right, at this time, unless Miss Woodlock tells you otherwise, it's time for your quiz.